Okay, so I've already made my dust here. Now, I'm hoping I didn't go too deep. I'm going to go ahead and try it before I start cutting it away. The dust is almost touching the spindle. Not quite there. About 3/4 of the way in the notch. And now, I want to see if I can get it to the ignite. So we got to warm this thing back up. Starting to see a little smoke. And now I want to go, keep enough spin. The dust looks nice and brown. It's starting to look black at the top. I had to get a dense yucca so that it wouldn't bore down in there too fast. The first piece of yucca that I used was way too soft, and it would just go down in there. It would bore in really, really fast. So now I'm starting to see a coal, or starting to see dust fall out of the notch. So I may not have it wide enough, because it may not be staying in there long enough for this to catch. It's definitely starting to turn black. So now I just want to, if possible, go faster. And I'm hoping it'll stay in the notch long enough to ignite an ember. What I'm not seeing is smoke rolling out of the dust, and that's what I'm looking for. And I may be too deep into this one. I may have to stop, trim it down, but I'm going to wait until it just won't spin anymore, which it's getting there. So what I did, and I think it paid off, is I kept the spindle in the socket because there was still smoke rolling out long enough to form a coal. Like, it was hot enough, but the dust wasn't staying there. So at the end of that, I just stopped, and I think the heat from the spindle was enough to ignite what was in the notch. Because what was happening is the notch was too narrow, and it was boring down too fast, creating too much dust, forcing the dust out before it could ignite. But by holding it in there sometimes, if this is hot, the dust won't be pushed out, and that'll give, if there's enough heat on the spindle, it'll ignite that dust. So just a little trick to know. So we've got cedar, yucca for the spindle, cedar for the handle, cedar for the weight, yucca for the spindle, and yucca for the fireboard. So yeah, we've got 12 inches from where it's tied off here to where it stops. This is 17 inches long, the handle. The weight is really what's going to be important. That's 15 inches. This weighed over half a pound, so 0.6 pounds. And the length of the spindle, the total length, is probably as short as you'd want it to go. 23.5, so 24, 2 foot would be ideal. Distance from the weight to the end of the spindle was 3.5. Now you'll notice I let this go lower on the last one. Now I would be able to keep my feet underneath that if I had the fireboard propped up. So this is a way that if you still wanted to kind of hold it into place, but you got to be careful because this could lower and you may not realize it, and then, or if it tilts to one side or the other, it could hit you. But if this is heavy enough, you don't even need to use your legs because there's enough downward pressure to keep it centered. So it's real easy to keep that centered into place. So my fireboard is yucca, and it's about 3/4 to a 1/2 inch thick. And I've just got it secured on a larger weight. So here's our fireboard. You can see the other softer piece of yucca, and this same spindle was just boring through it, and the dust was real brown. It never turned black, and it would get stuck. So that's an indication that your fireboard's too soft. So we got jute twine, and I wanted something that would be weaker, closer to natural cordage, and that's what I used. I cut into the spindle so that this wouldn't slide down, so I cut a couple of notches here so that this wouldn't slide. Now what you could do, because I cut this too large, is you make it larger at the bottom, smaller at the top, and force it till it gets stuck. You could also put a piece of cordage like I did here that would stop it, that it would almost kind of go over, and that would help lock it into place. A lot of different ways to do that. But that is a cedar weight with a yucca spindle and yucca fireboard. Because these are common in Texas, so I'm trying to use different materials that are common in my location. And so that's what you want to practice with to see what the correct combinations were. This was just a little over a 1/2 pound. So the bamboo that I used earlier, this piece here was 0.44 pounds, and this was 0.6, and that's the reason you can use this low amount of weight, because you're using such a small spindle.